If we were to rank the miracles of Jesus according to how comfortably they fit into a modern way of seeing the world and the way it works, then I think today's story will be very much on the difficult end. Jesus walks on water. But as we hear the story, what I'd like you to do in particular is to listen out for, in the story, how many examples you can think of metaphors for the Christian life, for the life of the believer. Moments when you hear something in the story that makes you think, yes, the life of faith can be like that. My experience has been a little bit like that. So from Matthew chapter 14. As soon as they had finished, he made the disciples embark and cross to the other side ahead of him, while he dismissed the crowds. He went up the hill by himself to pray. It had grown late, and he was there alone. The boat was already some distance from the shore, battling with a headwind and a rough sea. Between 3 and 6 in the morning, he came towards them, walking across the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were so shaken that they cried out in terror, "It is a ghost!" But at once Jesus spoke to them, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter called to him, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you over the water." "Come," said Jesus. Peter got down out of the boat and walked over the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the gale, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, "Save me, Lord." Jesus at once reached out and caught hold of him. "Why did you hesitate?" he said. "How little faith you have." Then they climbed into the boat, and the wind dropped. And the men in the boat fell at his feet, exclaiming, "You must be the Son of God." So how did you do? How many metaphors for the life of faith did you spot? What about that picture of a boat labouring against the storm, the wind against the boat, and struggling to make progress? Has the life of faith ever felt like that? I suspect it has. What about the early hours of the morning between 3 and 6? And the terrors that can come to us in those waking hours? Or what about the challenge to Peter to step out of the relative safety of the boat onto the troubled waters, stepping out in faith? Now that must ring a bell. And what about that moment of hesitation for Peter as he attempts to walk towards Jesus, but then suddenly notices all the challenges around him, the strength of the storm, and he loses his confidence? In that moment of hesitation, he begins to sink. I think some of us will have been there too. It's a passage rich with metaphors for the life of faith. What does it mean to live by faith? But although the reading is so rich in such pictures, it's actually at the very end that I want to focus our attention, because there's a phrase there, a picture there, which rings bells for me, and a particular theme that's been running through my mind and heart at this time. And it is that at the end of the passage, after all these experiences of encounter with the glory and power of Jesus, the disciples in the boat fall at his feet. They worship him. They acknowledge him as the Son of God. Just pause and reflect on just what is going on here. Here are men, the disciples, who are good and faithful Jews. You don't need to know much about the Jewish faith, the faith of the Hebrew people, to know that prime amongst their items of belief is that there is but one God, Yahweh, and that only Yahweh should be worshipped. And the Jewish faith goes to the nth degree to rule out any other kind of worship, any other kind of image, anything else that should come before the God who is utterly other and utterly worthy of worship. Now, in this moment, have the disciples suddenly forgotten that they are Jews with that absolute monotheistic heart of their faith? Have they suddenly put all that to one side because they've discovered a new kind of religion? I am sure that they have not. And there's actually something even more profound going on here. That in that moment, those disciples have realized that what they have experienced in that metaphor upon metaphor of experience of what it means to be people of faith, they have discovered something true about the one God in whom they put their faith. They have seen that in Jesus to the extent that they can see that Jesus represents all that God is to them at that moment in that encounter. That sense of the God who comes to them in their moment of struggle. Not passively, but actively. That in Jesus' encounter with them and in that invitation to step out of the boat and to, in their moment of crisis when Peter is sinking between the waves, to reach out to save them. This is the very nature of God, the character of God. The disciples have discovered something significant about who God is in their encounter with Jesus. They don't have the full picture yet. And all the Gospels bear witness that faith will not be true faith until they know that the Jesus they worship is the Jesus crucified and risen. This is just a partial picture yet, but Matthew is just beginning to open our eyes to what the disciples are discovering, that as we encounter Jesus, as Jesus comes to us in our situation, we are discovering the very nature and being and presence of the one God whom we are called upon to worship. This is a profound moment indeed. In all the Gospels, I think it could be said that faith is much more of a verb than a noun. Faith is not something we have, like a book or a possession of some kind that we can name, that either we have it or we don't have it. But faith is a verb, it's something we do, and it's something we do as we encounter Jesus and as in Jesus encounters us and we discover who God is in that encounter. Which is why Jesus needs to challenge the disciples of how little faith they have. This is an invitation to put our faith into action, to make faith a verb that we do in our relationship with him.